Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan, who will be here in a few minutes, and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode of Orioles on the Verge, we're going to welcome Steve Melewski to the show. And later on this week, we're going to get into the best of the rest from our top 50 countdown. That is all on tonight's episode of Orioles on the Verge, which is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with all the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Tonight's guest has been covering the Orioles for the last few decades and is coming off a 17-year run as a reporter for MASN. He continues to cover the team on his own Substack, and we're very happy to have him on our show for the first time tonight. He is Steve Melewski. Steve, how are you?
I am doing great, guys. Appreciate you having me on and appreciate you promoting the Substack for me. Any word I can get out right now, as I'm doing this now for a whole 5 days, is a good thing. So happy to be with you tonight.
Absolutely. And I think I speak for many people in Birdland when I say that we're happy that you have a new platform there at Substack where you're continuing a lot of the great work that you did at MASN.
Well, thanks. It's been
I'll jump in now.
I was just going to say it's been an interesting time. It's been a transition, obviously. And for a short time, I was writing for BaltimoreBaseball.com. So I think I did not intend to confuse the reader by jumping around a couple places here, but I think it was good for me to keep, active while I was sort of sorting out what might be long-term destination. So Substack's where I'm at right now, steveonbaseball.substack.com. Certainly looking to build up my subscriber base. I know you guys have a following on there too and enjoy what you do and enjoy your, promoting of me. And again, happy to be with you tonight.
Absolutely. And we're glad to have you here. And I've got to jump in here with the big story of today, which is the return of Felix Bautista, who threw a scoreless inning in Monday's game between the Orioles and the Red Sox and had the fastball going in the upper 90s. It seems like the velocity is going to increase a little bit more as spring goes on. Steve, what did you think of that performance? And as you start to look ahead to the regular season, what will Bautista's return mean to this team?
Well, I think this was the best day of spring training for the Orioles because the mountain was back on the mound. And, I mean, that was so exciting. There aren't many, as you guys know, spring training games that kind of separate themselves from just the drudgery of spring. But this one was not created equal with other days. This was a special day. The guy had not pitched in a game since August of 2023. And he looked good. I mean, he was touching 97. He got 3 quick outs, 13 pitches. The fastball was mostly back, more to come. And the smile was back, and the big guy was back. So, I mean, being in that clubhouse the last few years, his teammates love this guy. The coaching staff loves him. He lights up the room. And so his presence, I think, is meaningful to the Orioles as much as the obvious talents he brings to the ninth inning.
Yeah, that was definitely a different vibe today watching that game when he got out there. And then afterwards, seeing the smile, it just looked like pure relief on his face when he finished that inning. Switching gears to the rotation and some of these starters, a lot of the starting pitching has been performing pretty well. And one of the younger guys fighting for a job right now is Cade Povich. He's put together 2 solid outings now this spring. I think he's maybe not considered a favorite to make the opening day roster, but does his performance this spring, do you think gives him a better chance, especially considering that he had a really strong finish to last season in the big leagues?
I think he's certainly doing all he can do, but he probably realizes, and I think Brandon Hyde has pretty much acknowledged, they have their 5 if the Orioles say, knock on wood when we say this, that group of 5 stays healthy throughout camp. As we know with pitching, man, things happen, and from day to day it can look very different. But Povich is certainly great depth at the worst, and perhaps a key contributor at the best. I mean, this guy looked really good in September. The pitchability factor is strong for him right now. He's not throwing the ball by hitters, but he's still getting some whiffs, swings and misses. He got the other day, fan 6 and 3 innings. So love the pitch mix. He looks really sharp for that early in spring, and he needs that, right? I mean, Cade Povich needs pitchability. He needs his command. If he's leaving balls in the middle, they're going to get hit. So really great start to spring for him.
On the flip side of that, we've seen Albert Suarez come out of the gate struggling, and it has sort of been seen that Suarez has perhaps an inside track to a bullpen role and could be a fallback option if the Orioles can't keep their 5-man rotation intact throughout the spring. Now, we do know that Suarez is working on a different pitch mix, but has anything you've seen in his first couple outings given you any concern and raised any doubts in your mind that maybe he won't go north with the team after camp?
Not yet. I think it's too soon to get to that level with him. He proved it. He proved it last year what he can do at the major league level. One thing I have noticed, and I observed under the Mike Elias front office, and maybe it's different for certain individuals, I don't know, but I think they really don't put much stock in spring training. And that's for the guy who hits 380, just for the pitcher whose ERA is 680. I think they realize guys are working on things. They're, as they say, getting their work in. And I've always looked at spring training stats as they're not created equal. I don't worry about Cedric Mullins' stats or Mountcastle or Gunnar or Westberg, the established guys. Who cares what they hit? It's the guys who are on the fringe or competing for a job, especially young guys you want to see do well. Kobe Mayo had that early 2-run single, and he really hasn't got – I don't know if he's got a hit since then, so you really want to see him get going. Guys like that. But to answer your question, I do not have a concern about Suarez after 2 outings. 2 weeks from now, maybe it'll be different if it's still like this.
And the guy behind the plate catching some of these pitchers, Sammy Basayo, I know you've written about him recently. He's really turning heads this spring, earning a lot of positive feedback from veterans, showing his power at the plate. I think it was the Charlie Morton quote, asking who Samuel Basayo was. I felt like that was a pretty instrumental in Basayo getting noticed there for a veteran like Morton to be like, hey, who's the 20-year-old kid over there catching? But do you think there is a chance that he debuts this season before the season ends?
Yeah, I think there's a strong chance of that. Probably later than sooner, rather than sooner than later. But the guy is obviously making a name for himself at camp. His defense has come along. The interesting thing is for years since they signed this kid, people have been talking about his deficiencies on defense at catcher. And for years since they signed this kid, Oriole people have been telling me, we kind of like this guy as a catcher. We know he's not Johnny Bench back there, or maybe even Adley defensively with his blocking and receiving. But the arm is obviously big. It's legit 70. I have scouts tell me in the last year that he throws with more velocity and both more accuracy than Adley right now. They feel that's true. And he's so agile that as he continues to grow, and it's comical they list him at 180 when the guy's like 220 or 240, and you still see some listings that say 180. That was when he was in 8th grade, maybe. But Basayo's really handling himself well for such a young guy at camp. He's showing the bat. The defense has improved. I did an interview with Keith Law recently, who ranked him 3rd in his top 100, and he really gave a pretty glowing report on his potential for defense. So all this is good. Another kid, for me, he's another kid like Felix, in that he lights up the room too. I've interviewed this kid a couple times now where he has gone back and forth between Spanish and English, and he'll throw some English in there and it sounds really good. And when he smiles again, it's very noticeable. And a great engaging personality. So I think when he finally arrives in Baltimore, Nick, and the fans start to see this kid play, they're going to fall in love with him. his personality. I see a little bit of, like a young Santander type, how he played so well for the fans and was such an engaging guy. I mean, he's not that right now at such a young age, but you could see him becoming that kind of personality in that Baltimore clubhouse.
I love that. I remember when he was, I think, like in the Florida Complex League, and you seen a video, he got hit by a pitch, a slower, curveball maybe. It clearly didn't hurt, but he's falling all off to the side, and being really dramatic about it. And I've always felt like I've had the chance to meet him or talk with him yet, but I'm glad you brought that up. That it really does feel like you got guys like Colton Cowser on this major league roster, Mountcastle, Adley. You've got guys who it's very easy to fall in love with as a fan. And it does seem like Basayo, once he gets up and hopefully establishes himself, he's just going to be next in line. That's someone that a lot of Orioles fans they're going to be buying that jersey. They're going to be rocking Basayo jerseys at Camden Yards. Be pretty excited to see him in that lineup every single day.
He's mature beyond his years. He's one of many success stories in the Orioles Latin American educational program. He's a high school graduate now. He graduated through the Oriole program, as some of these other kids have done. And when I interviewed him, I guess in Bowie Media Day last year, or maybe it was another interview, they all run together. At some point, I've asked him about being the role model for the national program. You're the shining star, Samuel. Do you like that? Do you like that other kids will want to do what you're doing? You're the leader. They follow you. And he does like that. He likes being that role model. He's got a strong family unit. The people in Bowie last year really got close with his family. They told me about his parents, and his family is really supportive of this kid. He's just got a great support system, if you will. And so I think that's one of many reasons we're seeing this kid shine right now. He's well-liked throughout the Oriole organization. His family gives him great support. And he's going to play in the big leagues this year. It'll be a surprise if he doesn't, to me.
One more follow-up to Basayo. I feel like everybody's going to be talking about a lot about Samuel Basayo this year, but an idea that everybody's throwing around, like, when are they going to extend Gunnar? When are they going to extend Adley Rutschman? When are the extensions coming? But an idea that we've kind of discussed is, could Samuel Basayo be one of the first bigger extension candidates we see from this organization, as someone who is, we locked down this guy for the long term because we love him so much, but also because, with the growing international pipeline in this organization, that's a real, kind of like you mentioned there, someone that a lot of other kids in the Dominican can look up to with, and the Orioles are able to lock that down, and he become a mainstay here in Baltimore for a long time.
Very interesting thought, because I would think most Oriole fans would think, well, he's maybe a candidate for that, but you got Gunnar and Adley and Westberg and Grayson. All these guys are ahead of him in the pecking order, but it could be that they're already starting to realize their future earning potential. And there are teams that have signed players, and you guys tell me, because I'm blanking on who it is, but I know it happened in the last year or two. Even before they got to the big leagues, they kind of locked up one or two of these guys who are these top prospects. And it would be an interesting thing to pursue, to see, is this the kid who to do it with, that you get that 6 or 7 year deal for an amount that seems ridiculous now. And then after he plays a year or two, if he tears it up, you go, holy heck, they got him for the next 8 years at X price. So interesting thought you have there.
Hey guys, I'm late to the game here. Thanks for coming on, Steve. Let me pull up this question we have. Sorry. Where am I?
Bob, we're expecting you to pass the late note to all of us so we can
yes
on it.
Where is it? Okay, sorry. From Seth in our Discord. What's the read on Kobe Mayo this spring? Too early to make declarative statements, but it seems like he's missing a decent opportunity to force his way onto the roster. I know he's been hitting the ball hard, but hasn't really had the luck. What do you think his spring has said about his season?
We were talking a little bit before you got here that he had that 2-run single early on. It was like 113 off the bat, and he had some really nice swings in the first few games, and now it's been kind of quiet for him. And so that's mildly concerning. I'm not going to get too worried. We're what are we, 8 or 9 spring games in? So give him more time. It's very likely he doesn't make the opening day roster. And he's going to have to go to AAA and reestablish. But right now, I think the fan in me says, I really want that kid to have a couple of really good swings in Florida. So when he begins his year, likely at AAA, the confidence is there. And he kind of gets last year's major league stats out of his system and feels like he's reestablished himself. So I don't think he's done that yet in Florida, but there's plenty of time for him to do it.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping he had that Colton Cowser type of season where Cowser obviously struggled mightily in his limited time in 2023. He was, worked his tail off and then came into spring, had a nice spring, and then could have been rookie of the year. We thought maybe he should have been, but still time for Mayo to do that, I think. But yeah, it's early. Spring training numbers don't mean too much. Jake Fox.
Yeah, I know we do have a couple of questions about. Sorry, Zach. I think Zach's delayed a little bit. We got a couple prospect related questions, obviously, but I want to talk about one more question about the big league squad and the coaching on the big league side. You've covered Robinson Chirinos when he was a player in Baltimore. You saw Buck Britton rise through the system as a player and then a successful manager at each stop he'd made in the minor leagues. But both of them now being on the major league coaching staff, knowing them and this roster as well as you do, what strengths do you think they're going to bring to this clubhouse and in that Orioles dugout this season?
I'll tell you, both those guys are great additions. I am so happy to see them both there, and particularly Buck Britton, who I've known longer than Robinson. And I was interviewing Buck Britton when he was not even a regular at Bowie way back in the day. Buck Britton was Colton Cowser before Colton. You know how Colton's, Mr. Loose, cuts up with everybody, never met a guy he couldn't have fun with. That was Buck back in Bowie when Caleb Joseph and those guys were playing there. He was just a funny guy, fun to be around, and I gravitated to his personality. And then over time, I learned that this guy's a little bit of a jokester, but man, he sure knows the game, and he maximized his playing career. Buck got every ounce out of what talents God gave him to never make the big leagues, and he didn't make the name like his brother did, but he went as far as he could go. And when he got into coaching, I was like, wow, never has there been a player who is more suited for this. He's going to embrace it. And then when he became a manager and players start telling me how much they love playing for him, didn't surprise me in the least. So he has paid some dues here. And I think what the Orioles have in Chirinos and Buck, and both maybe in different ways and maybe for different reasons, but they have players those young Orioles love and trust in. And I've heard guys come to AAA have told me, from Connor Norby to Kyle Stowers to Gunnar, that Buck has your back in every case, but he's not going to just tell you what you want to hear or need to hear. He's going to tell you what you want to hear, what you need to hear. That's what I'm trying to say. And Buck will give it to you straight. If something's coming up short, Buck would call a player in Norfolk and tell him, here's what's going on right now, and you need to get this ish together on this. So I think he has their respect. I know Chirinos does. He was a breath of fresh air in that clubhouse, and he and Rougned Odor helped teach those guys how to win. They both had terrible stats, and I've heard fans always say to me, well, this guy's not a leader. His OPS is 560. I'm like, yeah, I get that, but the players respect him and his career. They know he's been places they want to go. And so Robinson Chirinos, he helped teach those guys how to win in 2022, and a lot of them are still around. And so these are great additions. I mean, tells you what they think of Chirinos. They made him the bench coach for a guy who's never coached in the major leagues. And, Buck is like, do what we need, which Buck can do. Work with the infielders today. You're the hitters tomorrow. Tell Grayson Rodriguez what you think about his slider today. The next day, he'll be a great addition. So really happy for both those guys that they got gigs with the O's.
Yeah, and we've talked about in the past how those soft factors that you can't, pin down to a number, the analytics, you can't put a number on it, but it's refreshing to see that Mike Elias, even though he came from Houston where they're, all numbers all the time, he's able to kind of turn a human element into it as well, trying to keep the clubhouse upbeat, fresh, whatever the vibes, keep them strong, so maybe that's why they overachieved in 2022 and 2023. So I agree. It's nice to have these guys in the clubhouse. I'm sure the players are going to be really comfortable.
For sure. And Elias has done a good job of, and you're not going to bet 1,000 in this, because sometimes you're going to overlook something about maybe a player's makeup or personality because his talent's just so good. You got to have the guy. But even with some of the top Oriole players, I mean, look at Kerstad. Jackson was the number 1-1. Adley was 1-1. Kerstad was 1-2. Kauser's 1-5. Those are 4 high character, no ego guys. How do you take 4 kids in the top 5 in the draft that have been told nothing but how great they are for years and years and are about to get millions of dollars when they sign, and they're good teammates? They have no ego. They just want the Orioles to do well. So I give credit to Elias and his staff for finding good people and good players. When you get that 1-2 punch, you really have something. And sometimes when I run into Oriole fans around town, I tell them, I said, let me tell you something I know about the team that you don't, because I'm lucky enough to go in the clubhouse. It's a great group of guys. When you really get to know these personalities, you're going to, if it's possible to root harder for them, you might, because it's just a great group. So I've covered some Oriole teams, and I have to go back probably 15 years for this to be true now, where there were some guys in there, okay, I could take it or leave it. And I'm not looking forward to this interview today because I know so-and-so is going to be challenging. But that's not true anymore. And the Orioles have a really good team chemistry. They clearly do like each other. It sounds Pollyannish, I know, but it's the truth. And so when you experience it, as I have, you're not telling a story here. You're telling what is really going on.
We definitely love hearing that. And we're going to go to a prospect focus here from one of our listeners, Vivek. He wants to know, is there a prospect in the system that you are personally higher on than maybe the national consensus or maybe some fans are?
I'll tell you, I wrote about a guy today on my Substack, Levi Wells, and I know you guys have ranked him in your top 50. I saw that. And here's why I'm high on him. Not for anything personal with me, but I talked to a scout recently who rolled out some really good opinions for me on a bunch of Oriole young talent, and he really likes this kid. And he was 4th-round draft pick who has, as I wrote today, better stuff than his stats. If you're scouting him off the box score of the stat sheet right now, no one's going to know the name Levi Wells. But when I talk to this scout who knows much more about it than me, I hear his enthusiasm for this kid, and I go, wow, what's going on with him? Well, what's going on, as you guys know, he gained velocity on the Orioles watch. He's touching 97 or more. His changeup, this scout told me the data on that his organization compiled was really impressive. And the scout also said to me, hey, Steve, he started at Aberdeen. He didn't start in the Florida Complex League. He didn't start at Delmarva. He started in Aberdeen. Now, he didn't pitch his draft year, 2023, but the next year, still some pitchers might have gone to Delmarva. This kid goes right to Aberdeen, pitched there all year, and so probably a good chance he gets to Double-A Chesapeake this year, maybe at the outset or maybe early. So he's one. I just love stories like that. Kids who, I like to write about them and learn about them before they make a name for themselves. It's harder to do that now because there's so much great coverage of young talent that who flies under the radar anymore? Almost no one. So you find a kid who's not yet in a top 30 that a scout's kind of raving about a little bit, gets my attention. So I wish I talked to more scouts. I don't have the relationship with some of the scouts as I do with this specific individual I talked to recently. If I did, I'd love that. I could just have a steady stream of scouts roll out info to me, because some scouts are protective. They're not going to just tell you their real feelings to any media guy. It's got to be someone they've got somewhat of a relationship with. And I was lucky that this gentleman, very good scout, gave some nice opinions, and one was on Levi Wells.
Yeah, we like him. It's Nick especially.
Yeah, I went to JMU, and so your JMU moving to the Sun Belt. I love the Sun Belt prospects, and didn't get to see Levi Wells when he was in college, but yeah, I am super glad to hear that about Wells, that confirmation there. But I mean, just zooming out and looking at the pitching development as a whole in this organization, and from the major leagues down to the minor leagues, I think something that's been a real pillar of our coverage, despite the constant, negativity surrounding this from a lot of fans and the people not wanting to believe. But it really does seem like the pitching development in this organization does not get the credit it deserves. But it feels like as last season went along, and especially this offseason, you're seeing more and more of those, quote unquote, under the radar arms like Wells, like Nestor Herman, Trey Gibson, Michael Ferret, etc. They're fully on the radar now, or finding themselves more and more on their radar. As you've been in contact with, other scouts, coaches, evaluators over the last, year or two specifically, are you getting that same feedback that, some of these late round picks and small school arms the Orioles are grabbing late in the draft, these are guys that fans should really take note of, and they're not just, they had a good year in Delmarva, but are they really starting pitching caliber prospects at the major league level?
I think I'll bet this is true. If we could poll every organization and get their true feelings, I think the Orioles would grade pretty well for their pitch development, maybe better than they would grade in the general Oriole population of fans who don't see a top 100, don't see Grayson, DL Hall, some big, he's number 10. They don't have that. But I do remind these fans that Bradish never made the top 100. John Means barely made a top 30. Yep. He was totally disregarded. And so it's impressive when you can take Herman, round 11, Trey Gibson, not drafted. Yes, of course, was the 5-round year. And some of these guys who are not high picks and turn them into something. And so I do think a day is coming, and I'll bet it's this year, when Elias uses one of those first 3 picks on a pitcher, maybe 2 of them. I mean, I think he's just finally going to say, I got to take a pitcher, top 30, somewhere in here. And that might be the guy we hang our hat on. But seeing some of these international guys like Morphe come on and some others get notice, I see quantity out of which some quality will emerge. You're not going to produce 8 out of 10 really good pitching prospects, but you might get 2 that have a chance to be in the big leagues. And if you get 2, that might still put you ahead of a lot of the game. So I think the Orioles are doing a lot right with their pitching program. Some of the guys I've interviewed, like Forrest Herman, these are sharp guys who really know what's going on. A guy like Forrest Herman merges the data and the analytics with the old school coaching, which is hard to do because most of the younger coaches are really skewed towards the data and that stuff. But do they know how to fix my delivery when I get out of whack just watching from the side? Well, some of these guys do. They're really good. And so I think the Orioles have some sharp guys. If you look at things like, and I know you guys have read like Baseball America, when they produced some of this Stuff Plus and they graded some pitching organizations in the last couple of months, the Orioles scored really well. So what they don't have right now is a lot of highly ranked pitching prospects, but I see quantity, and some guys are going to emerge and make it out of this group. If we were really good, we could name them who they are, right? So we can all say Morphe might make it, and the Levi Wells might. We're just guess. It's all guesswork. But you have a lot of them, and I think some will emerge.
Yeah, and I feel like even just in the past few years, pitching development has it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter like Albert Suarez. It doesn't matter, your ranking. You can learn a pitch. You can mess with your pitch mix, and people can come out of nowhere, especially I feel like now more than ever. But next question comes from The Bird is the Word, who says, Who is the most intriguing pitching prospect in the system, in your opinion? Obviously, this is right on topic what we're talking about here. But if you just said we couldn't predict who it's going to be, but that's what we're asking you to do.
It might be Morphe, Keeler Morphe for me, because he throws 100. He's 5'8". Those two usually don't go together. And the odds are stacked against a 5'8" pitcher making it in the major leagues. And that same scout I talked to gave me the perfect example of Marcus Stroman, 5'7", who's made it and had a pretty good career, because a 5'8" major league pitcher, right-hander, left, it doesn't matter, left or right, the odds are against him. Now, some things happen now in the game. 5'8" means your release point is going to be lower than 6'2" guy, probably, unless you're really over the top. And sometimes that works for guys now. The sidewinder, the 3/4, they get more cut, they get more movement. And so Morphe's getting a lot of movement, and he's got promising secondaries at 18. So, I mean, we're not talking, I mean, this guy's years away from when we can say he might pitch for the Orioles. And that's okay, because, I mean, at 18, it's not his time yet. He's low minors. He's got to work his way. But, to me, when I see 100 and when I see secondaries that show good spin rate, promising change up, you go, wow, this kid's not just some wild child with a big arm. And man, if they could ever harness it one day, he's got some of that already. So you put the brilliant minds in the pitching development, as we talked about, with a kid who's driven. And that part I don't know about him. I've never met him. I don't know how the coaches would grade him in coachability. Is he driven? Is he intense? Is he going to put in the work to do it? Maybe all are true. And then maybe you have something, and maybe he's going to show all of us that he can overcome the limitation that he can't work on, is being 5'8". I don't expect him. I mean, maybe at 18, maybe he'll still grow a couple inches. Maybe there's time for him there. But right now, he does not have the height of other guys.
As a fellow 5'8" person, he gives me hope, or just makes me feel worse about myself. One or the other.
Yes.
I have to jump in and ask this, because we've talked a lot about international prospects tonight. We were talking about Basayo earlier in the show, and we were talking about Morphe. You've had a chance to see this evolution of the Orioles being a non-factor in Latin America to now having a very aggressive scouting and player development under Kobe Perez and Mike Elias. How has it been to see that process evolved, and what sort of benefits do you think it's bringing the Orioles?
Immense. And we haven't even scratched the surface on that, because none of these guys yet have made it. Basayo looks like he's going to be the first, and we'll be able to say the Orioles, wow, they have an international major leaguer that started at the very ground level and made it all the way. That's hard to do. And so I think Kobe was one of Elias's first hires. Obviously, that was a great hire. Then he hired some people to be on his staff, and Kobe keeps getting promoted, deservedly so. And he and Elias are a great 1-2 punch, because Mike still loves to scout. He goes to the Dominican and looks at these kids, and he has extensive contacts there like Kobe. He was Kobe for the Astros at one time. So, and then the Orioles have others in their organization high up who are really good on the international front. And so they're doing good work here. And they've spent a couple $1 million players, which wasn't happening previously. And it's just going to be so big, because 30% of big league clubhouses are international. So if you don't want to play in that market, how are you going to beat the Yankees if you're letting them kick your butt internationally? And furthermore, what really helped teams like the Orioles is when they changed the rules, the Yankees could spend $80 million on international, and the Orioles might spend $2 million. But the Yankees can't have that advantage anymore, because they all spend similar amounts internationally. So now it comes down to scouting. And I don't think we'll ever see – I'm not going to say we'll never see an international draft, but I don't see it imminent. I just don't. I think there's too many challenges. So the Orioles are in good shape with Kobe and Mike Elias and the staff they have on international, the new Dominican Academy. They're doing great things behind the scenes. I've interviewed several times now a woman named Anaima Garcia. She's their educational coordinator. The players love her. She's teaching these kids how to handle United States, whether they go to McDonald's, whatever it is. These kids, we're taking for granted. They're not from here. They have to learn how do you handle yourselves? What do you do in the grocery store? So the Orioles are helping these kids with all of this, and it's all going to serve them well over the next few years, because as they've now fallen from number one, how do you stay in the top 6, 8, 10, 12? You better be good domestic and international. So I think that's going to help keep the Orioles as a pretty good ranked farm system.
Love it. I think just a couple weeks ago, they had another graduation, and you see the excitement on those kids' faces and the way they're posting on social media, how proud they are to get that diploma. And one of the squads, I know they have 2 DSL teams, that one of them had clinched the playoffs last year, and the celebrations were just pure, genuine joy. And those are always a lot of fun to watch. I have one more prospect focus question. Switch gears on the opposite end of that and talk about a kid from Vanderbilt who the Orioles took recently, and Enrique Bradfield Jr. He's a really intriguing prospect in the system because that's when the Orioles were picking later in the first round, and he's not the prototypical, power hitting middle of the order lineup guy that the Cowser and the Kerstads and others at the Vance Honeycutt that the Orioles have taken. What are you seeing in Enrique Bradfield? What are you hearing when it comes to Enrique Bradfield about his development and what his potential role in this organization could be?
I wonder long-term, will he hit enough to be a good everyday major leaguer? We know he's not going to hit for much power. Would he hit enough batting average-wise and on-base-wise to complement that great speed and defense? Because very few guys, as you guys know, have 70 or 80 great tools. He's got a couple of them. They say 80, defense and speed. That's true. It's almost like if you could combine Bradfield and Honeycutt, you'd have an MVP, because one of them, Enrique, doesn't have the power but has the contact. The other guy has the power but has too much swing and miss. If you could somehow put these two together. And I wrote recently that I think that is going to happen more often to the Orioles as they draft with their top picks 16, 18, 20, 22. You're going to take flyers on guys who have a wart somewhere. And for Enrique, it's the power. For Honeycutt, it's the swing and miss. So the Orioles have to work on these things, but both are said to be, and I haven't seen it in person a lot yet, elite defenders, just elite, like 80 grade. I mean, Honeycutt, they rave about this kid as they do Bradfield. So really, it's exciting to have that defense because it's so big and it's so overlooked, I think, by some of us when we just focus on, the batting line. But I like Bradfield. I love his makeup. He's another great kid, high character kid, big time program. Vandy, boy, he loves Vandy. You ever get to talk to him, get him started talking about Vandy baseball, he'll go for 10 minutes. And so the pride he has in his college is impressive. I like the kid. I wonder if he only hits 210 as opposed to 260 or 80. That's a big difference. And so we're going to find out when the time comes where he lies there.
Hey, got a hold of one in a spring game a couple days ago. So
he did. How about that?
Do that a little more often.
Yes. Yeah. He's put on a little weight, but he's still slender.
Yeah.
It's nowhere near Jackson Holiday. If collides with him, he's going to send Enrique 20 feet. But that's okay because it's not – Enrique's never going to be that big. He never should. He needs his speed and his flexibility. But somewhere in there, you need some bulk too. The Orioles, I think, hope to get him to where he can hit some doubles, realizing, if he played every day in the major leagues, he might hit 5 home runs or something. And if he gets more out of him, good. But they got to get a few extra base hits out of the guy.
Love it. I don't know if Zach or Bob have any more questions. I do have one more I'd like to ask. I know we said 20, 30 minutes. We're almost at 40. Thank you again for your time. But
wordy.
This has been great. But to bring it back to the major league side of things, to close up on my end, I think it was your last post over at BaltimoreBaseball.com. You put up some predictions about the upcoming season, including that the Orioles will win the AL East. But I really liked the note you included in there about There's so much time and space dedicated to discussing what's missing from this roster. But as you said, there's a lot to like. And I greatly enjoyed that optimistic piece because instead of the usual, why didn't the Orioles trade for an ace? Is the offseason grade a D or an F or a C minus, whatever? What is it about this group that stands out to you that gives you confidence that we're going to hopefully have a good year here in Birdland?
Well, and I skew towards positive. I've always been that way. I mean, I grew up loving the Orioles. And it's hard for me to separate the love I had as an 8-year-old kid and the media guy. I've told Brandon Hyde, you guys are going to win the World Series, and I am going to be in your office bawling my eyes out. Just know when the time comes, don't be surprised about that, because I love the Orioles. So maybe I do see it sometimes with orange-colored glasses, because I can't just put that aside and all of a sudden see it, think with no – not without my heart in there somewhere. I mean, this is my team. But I think you guys could see how much I like this group and the chemistry and thing. In a sport where we can stat everything, we still can't stat that. There's no data. There's no analytics. There's no video. There's no data point that tells us how this together group, and they are that, what that means to them. So I do think that means a lot to this team. I think Tyler O'Neill was citing that today on the Masson telecast. He's seen it already. They embraced him with open arms. He's already feels like he's been there 5 years. He's been there 5 weeks. So it's that stuff means something. And I just see too much young talent. Jackson Holliday is going to be okay. Kobe Mayo is going to be okay. Grayson may be becoming an ace in front of our eyes. Again, I'm very optimistic, probably more so than a lot of people out there. But that's okay. Because if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But yeah, man, I love this group. And I listen to sports talk sometimes and I think, gosh, sometimes we miss the fact there are some good things here, And I look at the fact that they won 101 games without an ace pitcher. Corbin Burns showed up. They won 10 fewer because they had injuries and other things went wrong. It wasn't his fault. But it can happen. The 2014 Orioles, Chris Tillman was the ace. He was never considered really a true number one. He was always a pretty good pitcher. So it can happen. And I just think this is the group. I think they're going to do it. And I think they can beat the Yankees. They beat the Yankees last year. They just fell apart for a couple weeks in September, and that gave the Yankees the division. Other than that, the Orioles were the Yankees equal, and head-to-head, they won more games than the Yankees did against the Orioles.
Well, we appreciate your positivity because we're kind of the same way, especially because we got started. We're not going to talk about the bad prospects or the ones that don't work out. We want to put a light on these guys. So we kind of skew positive too. And yeah, me personally, I've been a fan since I was a young kid. So it's definitely hard to separate. And I agree. There's so much to like. You think Gunnar Henderson, MVP candidate, Adley Rutschman, MVP candidate, Grayson, I think could be an ace. Bradish, if he comes back late in the second half, he's ace quality pitcher as well. So yeah, I like this team a lot. And I feel like it's almost a matter of time before they get there. Just this young group of talent with this system they have in place now. I don't see them being bad again anytime soon. Knock on wood.
No, the window's open. It's a long window to win. It's not going to be open for just another season or two. The international is humming. They do have prospects coming we haven't even much talked about yet, and you guys have written about them. So it's positive, and that we have a great fan base. It's passionate about the team that allows us to look at all the, quote, mainstream media that report so well on the Orioles, and then we have other outlets that are not like on the level of the Sun or the Banner or Masson or something like you guys. And you have a following, and there you have a passionate fan base, and Camden Chad has a passionate fan base. I look around all this and I say, how do all these fans consume all of our product? But they do, because they love this team, and there's history here in Baltimore. We got a beautiful park. So, I mean, it's easy to sit there and look at what might be wrong or where they may come up short, and they might. But sometimes you miss a lot. In 2012, I did a radio show on 105.7 The Fan when the Orioles returned to winning. And I would get calls every night. Oh, Steve, they'll be in fourth place in a week. And I said, why don't you guys just enjoy the ride and let's see where it takes them? And it took them to the playoffs. And some of the fans missed it because they were so worried about the other shoe falling. And they just kept winning. And they made the playoffs. So, baseball's great, man. We love it. And you guys have the passion for it. And I think you can tell that I sure do a couple of weeks from opening day.
Yeah, I mean, there's more to being happy in baseball to win a World Series. I just enjoyed the fact that we've had winning baseball consistently for the past few years, and it doesn't look like it's stopping anytime soon.
Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Steve, thank you again so much for joining us tonight. And before you go, let our listeners know where they can find your Substack, because if they haven't subscribed yet, they really should.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks. I hope they do. And you guys have supported that. And thanks for that. So Substack is like a website unto itself, which I've come to learn has 20 million or more people who go on each day and consume the articles, the videos, the audios. There's some really big name people on there. There are people with lesser names like me trying to make my way. So I'm new at it. As you guys have mentioned, steveonbaseball.substack.com will take you to, I guess you'd call it my homepage. And there is a free element and a paid element. Obviously, I wouldn't turn my back on someone wanting to put a few dollars in there. But if you just subscribe for the free part, there will always be free content at my site, my outlet, and I will always keep it fun. And once the games start, and we can get to ballparks like Baltimore and Bowie and Aberdeen, that's when I'm really going to dive into some stories. And I got some stuff coming, guys. I'm planning to do stories on the Oriole minor league broadcasters over the next few weeks. I've got a big interview with Kobe Perez not too long from now, where we're going to talk about international, and I'm going to take some of Kobe's insights and put together my rankings that I've done in the past. So got a lot of good stuff coming there. steveonbaseball.substack.com. Thanks
Excited
for the plug.
that. Yeah, looking forward to that for sure.
Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us tonight.
All right, guys, I will exit stage right and let you guys continue. But thanks for inviting me, and thanks for the support. And call on me anytime. We'll talk down the road some.
Sounds good. Thanks, Steve.
Right, you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. That does it for this episode of Orioles on the Verge. Thank you to Steve Melewski for joining us. We will be back later this week with the best of the rest from our top 50 prospects countdown. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also at Substack, oriolesontheverge.substack.com. And I should note, you can now find a link to our podcast merchandise store over at Substack, as well as links to all of those social media channels that I plug at the end of our shows every week. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network. Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we're going to dive into the best of the rest from our top 50 prospects countdown. As is the case every year, there are always a handful of players that might get one or two votes from us, but don't have enough points to get onto the overall top 50. We want to make sure we recognize those players. And we're going to do that in tonight's episode, which is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Now, before we dive into the topic of tonight's episode, just got to reflect on the appearance from Steve Melewski, which aired earlier this week. And if you're watching live, you just saw it end a moment ago. We've obviously been reading Steve's work for a long time, but we just now had a chance to have him on for the first time. And I think it's safe to say, guys, that was a really fun interview.
Yeah, it was like I was telling him at the end there, like, he kind of fits our vibe a lot because he's glass half full rather than glass half empty, which I feel like 90% of sports fandom in general, not even just Orioles fans. So I think we tend to be a little more looking at the positive than the negative. And yeah, gosh, I've been reading his articles since I can even remember. So yeah, it was really cool. And I'm glad we finally made it happen.
I greatly appreciated the optimism as we're sitting here in early March on the dawn of a new season. I'm so sick and tired of what the Orioles should but did not do this offseason. It was very refreshing. I felt like at the end of that, there's only one thing left to do, like win the whole damn thing at this point after that speech that he gave at the end there. Yeah, it is refreshing to hear somebody talk like that, especially when you're living on social media all the time and you see nothing but the negativity. Like these are our guys out there on that field that we're watching sometimes in spring training when we do get a video feed, but those are our guys, and like there's no reason to look back at the offseason and what didn't happen. Like this is the team that's going to go into battle for the most part, and I'm pretty stoked for what this upcoming season is going to hold. And yeah, if you're not already, go subscribe to Steve's Substack.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think enjoy competitive winning baseball in Baltimore. Just enjoy it while it's here. Don't worry about what is not happening. Yeah, I like that message.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And now we'll get into the best of the rest from our top 50 list. We had our top 50 countdown drop last week. Of course, you're a member of our Patreon community. It gradually rolled out over the course of about 6 to 8 weeks. But for those of you who listen to on the main feed, that episode dropped last week. If you hadn't had a chance to listen to it, go back and listen to it after this episode. On this show, we're going to dive into the players who just missed the list. Now, this is important for us to get across because sometimes these players jump onto the top 50 during the offseason if there's a trade, as has been the case the last couple of off seasons, although that didn't happen this year. But it's also a useful snapshot of the players that you should have your eye on going into 2025 because they could, in theory, stand to rise really far up the rankings. Or in some cases, maybe they're guys coming off of tough years that have to do something to reestablish themselves a little bit in 2025. And we'll start off with two players who appeared at the number 46 spot on two of our individual lists. And that is infielder Felix Amparo, who I had on my personal top 50, and outfielder Nate George, who also ranked 46, but on Nick's list. So, Nick, I'm going to start with you because you've written a lot about George since last year's draft. And I know that you're high on him. You've talked about it before on the show, and you've written about it at Substack. There's a lot of intriguing tools here. There's a lot to be excited about. And you like what you see enough that you went ahead and you put him on your personal top 50.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I just felt like he was honestly probably one of the hardest prospects to rank just because he's this high school pick. He's from Illinois high school ranks. He's a cold weather guy. I don't believe he was like massive in the travel circuit, so the showcase circuit, whatever it is. But the Orioles gave him a pretty big signing bonus, almost $500,000, and he's got speed and power in his profile. This is a kid who just literally walked onto a track and won like multiple state titles in track. He's that athletic. So he's got the speed, he's got the power. I think in high school he was posting exit velos of like 104, 105. I like he's got the training videos up on Instagram in the off season. Kid's jacked. So it's just as a 16th round pick. I forget which round they drafted him in, but as a later round pick and the high school pick, like this is the perfect type of prospect to take a big swing on. If he doesn't pan out, I mean, he was drafted near the end of the draft. You're not really expecting much out of him, but his ceiling is enormously high. And it's really fun to dream about what kind of prospect he can become. So that's what made it hard for me to figure out where do I rank him. And I figured he's got to be in the top 50 on my personal list. That's why I threw him there near the back. If he comes out hot in the FCL, of course, we'll move him up. But there's a lot to like here with Nate George. It's just a matter of, no one's really seen any of it before. So it's kind of just a wait and see approach there.
Yeah, that's why I didn't have him on my personal top 50. He's clearly on the radar. Same with Braylon Whitaker. Same with, anyone that they're going to take out of high school and give a nice bonus to. That's like red alert. Like they like this kid, obviously. So yeah, I think just want to see it in action, or quote unquote see it in action see the stat line at least in the FCL. But yeah, he's got the tools. It's just I feel like there was kind of like some ridiculously high evaluations of him after the draft, and then some that were like kind of a little bit dismissive. So I don't know. Let's see it in action, and hopefully it all works out. Yeah, I'm a fan. I like all these high school kids, and I want to see what they can do.
In terms of pure athleticism, I already know that I like Nate George as a prospect because it seems like I'm going to stop short of calling him a five-tool player, but it seems like there's a little bit of everything in his skill set to make him interesting. I had him just outside my personal top 50, and ultimately the reason that I didn't include him is that we haven't seen him play professionally, and that's only a small part of it. But the larger issue for me is, as Nick said, he's coming from a cold weather state, and he was a multi-sport athlete in high school, which is great. But it also raises the question of, is he a little bit raw compared to, say, a guy like DJ Layton, who a good athletic player, but had a little bit more exposure on the summer showcase circuit and has some clear card-carrying skills that he brings in to the professional level right now. So I do think, though, that with a good season in the FCL, George is easily going to be inside the top 40 of this list by this time next year, if not by the summer, maybe even higher.
And one more note on George. I can't remember where it was, but the college he was committed to, I feel like he was committed to a bigger school and then decommitted and then had committed again to a much smaller school, I think somewhere in Florida. And so that was another thing, like, okay, this kid is going to like a mid-major or like bottom tier D1 program. It may not even been a D1 program. I honestly cannot remember. But like, why then are the Orioles giving him $500,000 signing bonus here at this point? Like, did it really take that much to convince this kid not to go to whatever random school he was about to go to? It's something just, I don't know. There is a lot that just doesn't line up, doesn't make sense here. But I'm just going to trust the Orioles evaluations and say, yeah, he's completely raw. We know literally nothing about him as far as his play in the field, but I'm going to trust the Orioles. And that's why I'm just super intrigued to see who the heck he is.
Get an Uber athlete in on this development system, and I like our chances to make something happen.
I'll go down to Felix Amparo, who, as I mentioned, was 46 on my list. Amparo was signed by the Orioles as an international free agent in 2023, and he made his debut in the DSL that summer and put up kind of middling numbers. And he repeated there last year and improved in just about every area. And to give a scouting report on Amparo, he packs a lot of power into a relatively small frame. He's listed at 5'10", 180 pounds, but last year he belted 6 home runs while posting a 132 WRC plus in a Dominican Summer League. He also runs well. He's put up good stolen base totals in each of the last 2 seasons, including 24 last year. The 2 areas where he really can stand to improve his game are the walks. Now, his walk percentage did jump by 3 points this past year, but still only brought him up to about 6%. The good news is that the strikeouts came down significantly in the process. The other thing, too, is that while he has some defensive versatility, he's going to have to hit, and it's almost going to have to go on kind of a Connor Norby track, because right now he's playing primarily second, first, and third, and the defense at third base has not been good. And you should take errors with a huge grain of salt in the minor leagues, but you can look at that and you can tell that Amparo's defense at the hot corner has been a little rough over the last couple of years, and that he's probably going to end up on the right side of the infield. But when you have that kind of power for being as young as Amparo is, and you mix in the speed with that, and not to mention the cut that he made to his strikeouts, there's enough here that I'm intrigued to think that he at least represents the next tier of younger up-the-middle prospects behind guys like Emilio Sanchez, who are further up the list.
Yeah, looking at his strikeout rate, 8.2%. Like, come on. And this is clearly a guy who's aggressive in the box. And he batted 313. And you would think, oh, he must have been lucky with balls in play. No, it's 304. That's pretty much right around average. So clearly this kid can hit. And honestly, we don't have many first base prospects. If he can't just stand at second base or third base, who cares? First base DH type. He's still probably, he's 19, 4 or 5 years away if everything goes well. So yeah, I like it. I like him a lot. And yeah, his numbers really, really improved. I just remember looking at the box scores. We're looking for the Elvin Garcias of the world. We're looking for the Jordan Sanchez of the world. And not Edwin Amparo, Felix Amparo every day was just like 2 for 4, 1 for 3, just seemed like constantly hitting for power in the DSL at 18 years old. And you're got a 190 isolated slugging percentage. That's pretty damn good. So yeah, maybe not the second base / shortstop that he was signed to be, but if he's going to hit like this, I think you'll find room for him somewhere.
Yeah, not the Amparo guys, not related. Just a note. Yeah, the strikeout rate drop was pretty enormous. He, repeating the DSL, it's fine if they do that. They go the Northwest Florida State College to Eastern Illinois for Nate George. Yeah. Again, it's why he's so intriguing though. Why did the Orioles give him so much money? But with Felix Amparo, yeah, the repeating DSL, so yeah, he's a little bit older for the level, repeating it, but I like the dip in strikeout rate from 19% to 8%, the swinging strike rate from 32% to 15%, and the contact rate from 57 to 78%, and 0 home runs to 6 home runs. So I like that. That, in my mind, keeps him very intriguing, and he could see limited time in the FCL if he starts out hot and be in Delmarva pretty quickly and finish as still a 19-year-old. I don't know when his birthday is actually, but still finish as a 19-year-old, maybe young 20-year-old, playing well in Delmarva, setting himself up pretty well for 2026.
Just turned 19 less than a week ago.
Perfect. So he could still end the year as a 19-year-old in high A, like all of his peers did last year, Thomas Sosa, Estrada, Arias, etc. So yeah, interesting guy that I'm excited to get our eyes on for the first time this year.
Also, 39 stolen bases in 45 attempts in just over 100 games played. So another, if not speedster, then at least a guy who's willing to run.
As I mentioned at the top of the show, sometimes you have to look at this section of the list to figure out, okay, who has fallen off a little bit, because there are some players here that were consensus, not just top 50, but kind of pushing top 30 consideration this time last year, who have dropped off for various reasons in 2025. And 2 of them ranked 47th on our individual list. And one of them was outfielder Brylan Tavera, who was on Bob's list, while I had right-hander Justin Armbruster in that spot on my list. And I want to start with Tavera, who, as part of the 2022 International Free Agent class, was given a then franchise record $1.7 million signing bonus. His first couple of years in pro ball were not eye-popping stats, but he was at least a steady producer, moving up the farm system at about a level a year. And then he got to Delmarva last year, and although he battled injuries, was not good at the plate when healthy, and ultimately appeared in just 87 games, hitting 173 with a 297 on-base percentage and a WRC plus of 65. I saw Tavera, and I'll get into this in a little bit. I saw Tavera towards the end of the year, and I do think there are some reasons to be hopeful, even though he didn't make my personal top 50. So let's start there, Bob. Tavera's struggles, I just highlighted them, but overall, there's still an interesting skill set here. What led to you putting him on your top 50?
2024 is a wash. I don't think there's really anything positive for you could honestly take out of it. He was battling injuries. When he was healthy, he was not performing at all. Didn't look good, honestly. But he did cut down the swinging strike percentage a little bit. And I just think the fact that he's still at least the biggest or second biggest signing bonus they've ever given to one of these kids, to me, and I think we've heard behind the scenes that there was a lot to like there with the athleticism. I'm just giving him another year to try to bounce back. And I just didn't see and maybe I should have, and maybe he'll drop off soon, but I just didn't see any reason to, or anybody who was going to push him completely off the list for me. I just think there's clearly some upside there, or else, like, he's got all the tools. He's got the speed. He was caught stealing more than you would like. He's shown power in the past. In the FCL, he had 4 home runs in 35 games with 5 doubles. Like, that's not terrible. I think the strikeout percentage was good in 2023 in the complex. 117 WRC plus. I don't want it to immediately think of Michael Hernandez and put him in the same box as Michael Hernandez kind of ended up in. So I'm just basically give him another chance to see what he can do.
I definitely skewed more towards Michael Hernandez here, just because. But I do think I pulled the trigger a little too quick there with Tavera, because he was not on my top 50. I don't think he was, but I still am very intrigued by him, just because actually the reason why, last year was a wash is because he had a shoulder injury. So that's why he spent a big chunk of that time on the IL. I'm pretty sure it was a shoulder injury, just the one. But like, that's going to zap a ton out of you. So I give him the benefit of the doubt. I do know he just turned 20 like a week ago, 2 weeks ago. I remember the Orioles player development tweeting that out. I think that's also another sign too, that I don't know if it means anything or not, but like, they don't wish happy birthday to everybody. So clearly someone in the organization was just like, hey, this is a guy we like, wish him happy birthday on social media. As stupid as that sounds, that's just something that I keep in the back of my mind. But yeah, I think the shoulder injury just zapped everything from him last year. And so I'll give him another shot. He did show improvements when he went from the DSL to the FCL. If you look at a lot of those numbers there, he improved in a lot of different areas. So he was definitely trending up before the injury. Let's see what he can do. Give him, again, just turned 20. So if he's, 2-3 months into the season and he's below league average bat, there's no reports of an injury, then yeah, I'm going to be super skeptical. But if he's showing improvements in certain areas, if he's got a little bit of pop 2 months into the year, it's not do or die this year, but he's certainly a guy that I think you definitely worth paying attention to when he repeats Delmarva this year.
Yeah, I just wonder if cold weather for the first time, slow start, gets an injury relatively early, if maybe he just let things spiral and it just got away from him. So let's see what happens.
Tavera was close to making my top 50. He was in consideration for a spot towards the very, very back of the list, but I ultimately just didn't pull the trigger on it because there were some players that I liked a little bit better. I did get a chance to see him late last year at Delmarva, and I thought by that point, and this is late August, he looked pretty comfortable in the box, good line drive stroke. So what I'm hoping we'll see is that, A, he's healthy and that the shoulder is cleaned up, and we don't know how it was feeling when he was actually playing. This could have been something that was hindering him all year or for most of the year. So hopefully the shoulder is good. He's got a clean bill of health, and he's able to go to Delmarva and really tap into some of the things we saw with his bat in the FCL a couple of years ago. Seemed like the power was coming along at that point. He's generally had good walk to strikeout numbers at every level he's played at. So that's another reason to be optimistic. One thing I really want to learn more about this year, if he is healthy, is what the Orioles see for him defensively, because we know that if he's going to end up on a corner, that puts a lot more pressure on the bat to develop. But if there is a thought that he could stick in center field, as some reports suggested early on in his career, then there's another reason to be optimistic about what he could do going forward. I'll jump now to Justin Armbruster, who, as I mentioned, was 47 on my list. And at this point last year, Armbruster was a consensus top 30 prospect who a lot of people, ourselves included, thought might have a shot at getting to the major leagues last season. And that didn't happen because his numbers in Norfolk were pretty bad. And save for a stretch around July where he did seem to find a groove and pitch pretty well, it was a struggle for him throughout the year. 7.54 ERA, a 6.16 FIP. What was odd, though, and this really left us scratching our heads, by most underlying metrics, his fastball was better last year than it had ever been before. The stuff plus was good. The fastball velocity was ticking up a little bit, but yet it seemed like in his bad starts, what would happen was that hitters would pounce on the fastball early. And then the secondaries, he just couldn't get him over for strikes, or he wasn't hitting the right parts of the zone. And next thing you know, he's given up 5 to 7 runs over the first 3 innings of the game. I kept him on my list for the simple fact that he is still probably going to go back to AAA this year. And if he gets off to a good start, he's right back in that conversation of arms who could contribute in the near term to the major leagues. The other thing is that I wonder, with the fastball velocity increase, and I'm really curious to get your guys' thoughts on this. With the fastball velocity increase, is there a possibility that maybe Armbruster goes to the bullpen? He's been really durable throughout his career, but maybe there's a case now that if he's not going to stick as a starter at the higher level, you turn him loose in the bullpen and see how much better can that fastball get.
That's the answer. I mean, if there is an answer, that's going to have to be the answer, I feel like, just because, yeah, it's like you said, the fastball looked good, but if you literally cannot land any of your off-speed pitches for a strike, then hitters at this level, they're just going to sit on your fastball, and it doesn't matter how strong it is. For the most part, they'll be able to hit it. So I think he just needs to focus on, and watch, I'll be completely wrong, and he'll just come back out and have like a 3 ERA over 150 innings this year in AAA. But I think he should just pick the 1 or 2 off-speed pitches he feels most comfortable with, pair that with the fastball, try to ramp it up out of the bullpen, maybe multi-inning reliever. But yeah, I think all hope is not completely lost. I mean, it's again, just like Tavera, it's kind of a wash year, but it didn't help that he had a 59.1% left on base percentage. That's pretty bad. So he didn't get any favors from the relievers coming in behind him either. So, I think it was a little bit of bad performance mixed with bad luck led to a season with a 7.54 ERA. I don't think we're going to see that again. But yeah, I think bullpen or bust could be in the near future.
Yeah, so frustrating. And I'm pulling up quickly while this is pulling up. Actually, I think I was talking off air a couple weeks ago how I was, all the prospects we've had on the show, I'm trying to start a collection. I'm not big into like baseball card stuff anymore, but I'm trying to get like autographed cards of everyone we've had on the show. And we've had Armbruster on the show, so I did pick up this nice, sweet little Justin Armbruster autograph card. So I'm not just being optimistic in hopes that that has value one day, but all that to stall so this would load. I pulled up Armbruster's card last year. This from TJ Stats on Twitter, great follow, of course, and all of his fun apps that he has. And yeah, you look at his stuff, the fastball, 18 inches of induced vertical break. It's a 60 grade offering, a 106 stuff plus. His overall repertoire had a 102 stuff plus grade. He's got was the cutter graded out as an above average offering. The sweeper slider is an average offering. Like, he's got multiple pitches. And I think the slider was something that he introduced after he got drafted. Or maybe it was the slider that was dominant in college, and that was, the idea that maybe it could be a fastball slider reliever type guy. Either way, yeah, I think a move to the bullpen could do a lot of good. The data is there. Like, the stuff I think is there for him to be successful at the next level. We'll see. They left him unprotected in the Rule 5 draft. He didn't get picked. I'm assuming they left him. They protected him in the minor league phase of the Rule 5 draft. Otherwise, of course, he would have been selected in that phase. We'll see what happens this year. He's off to a good start in spring. It's spring training. Again, we just talked with Steve Melewski, and spring stats mean nothing, but he has 2 2/3 scoreless innings, no hit innings this spring. I don't know. It was still just, we talked about him a lot last year, and I think I still never fully developed my thoughts about Armbruster and what I saw because of how good he was in 2023 and how it just seemed to collapse last year. And what does it all mean? But I do agree that probably you move him into a bullpen role and you could potentially see him in the major leagues at some point this year, I think.
Prospect of a completely different type, another outfielder here who ranked 47th on Nick's list, Douglas Hodo III. Hodo was drafted by the Orioles out of Texas in 2022 in the 6th round, and he came into pro ball with a reputation as an excellent defensive outfielder who ran well. And over the first year and a half of Hodo's career, the player we saw was basically a outfielder who played all three positions really well, could steal bases, draw a lot of walks, but there just wasn't much to the bat. Then all of a sudden, last year at Aberdeen, he got on a hot streak that seemingly never stopped. He ended the year at Bowie, had a nice run in the Arizona Fall League, and overall 16.7% walk rate. Now, that did come with a high strikeout rate in the regular season of 28.3%, but Hodo also belted a career high 9 home runs while posting a 128 WRC plus. That was enough for him to rank 47th on Nick's list. He came very close to mine, and in the end, I just didn't find the room for him. But, Nick, I've covered some of the big points with Hodo. What are your thoughts on him as a prospect at this point? Do you think that what we saw last season is a sign that there's another gear to him?
I think last year was who he is. I don't think there's much more ceiling or another gear there. But the reason I threw him in there in the back end of the list, and this is where I always kind of struggle with my list, like, do I throw some of the younger guys with higher ceilings who are like super wild cards, or do I play it safer with a guy like Doug Hodo? And that's why I threw Hodo in a top 50 spot, just because I do think that last year was his first full healthy year in pro ball, and he was very good. He had a combined 128 WRC plus across 2 levels. 51 for 58 in stolen base attempts. Like the raw stolen base numbers with the minor leaguers, they're fun to look at, but I really pay attention to their success rate. I think that tells you a lot more. And Hodo was very successful in when he decided to steal. So I think their speed, you mentioned the defense. He is a very good defender out in center field, can play all three outfield spots. Don't know exactly how strong the arm is. Don't remember a lot of highlights from him defensively, but I think this is a guy who, he doesn't have any trade value to the Orioles, but you keep him in the organization as, quality AAA depth until he enters, minor league free agency. For a 6th-round pick, I think if that's his career trajectory, that's a massive win and a pretty good career there.
Yeah, honestly, I'm getting like Hudson Haskin vibes from Hodo. I feel like similar type of player. Obviously, Haskins has kind of stalled out, maybe mostly due to injuries, but I just feel like 40 extra base hits, 51 stolen bases, good defense in the outfield, right-handed hitter who's just scrappy. He's going to go out there and be your uncle's favorite baseball player when he goes to a Bowie Bay Sox or a Chesapeake Bay Sox game this year. But there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's incredible depth to have. I feel like in the second half or even 2026, 2027, he's going to be that right-handed hitting outfielder that's just sitting there in AAA Norfolk waiting for an opportunity if there's an injury and you need a 4th or 5th outfielder. Obviously, got a lot of those guys on their way up, but can't hurt that. Just, wait for that opportunity to knock. Maybe he could be this year's Billy Cook and raise his value enough to be part of a prospect trade at the deadline for a Patrick Riley type of pitcher. I don't know if he's quite to that level, but I think it was an incredible season for him. Great comeback based off of, being injury prone the first couple of years and not having the greatest numbers maybe because of that. But it was a great year for him, and hopefully he can keep it going and see what happens.
That's a good point, Bob, especially as Hodo enters his last season before he is Rule 5 eligible for the first time. So something to consider there. Now, speaking of injury prone, Jake Cunningham ranked 49th on Bob's list. And Cunningham is a player we have talked about a lot since he was drafted by the Orioles in 2023. You might remember that at the time, then director of draft operations, Brad Seelick, called Cunningham a tool shed. And as a high, kind of high ceiling outfielder out of UNC Charlotte, albeit one with a little bit of an injury history, he was a guy that was getting a lot of eyeballs coming into the system. He had a nice summer with Delmarva and a very limited sample size out of the draft and seemed poised to have a big year there in 2024 for his full season debut. Unfortunately, Cunningham missed a lot of time because of injuries when he was with Delmarva, and when he was on the field, really struggled at the plate, hitting just 208 with a near 32% strikeout rate and a 91 WRC plus. However, the Orioles gave him a surprising late season promotion where he went to High A Aberdeen and while we didn't see a lot of power there, the hit tool was much better. He then went to Arizona Fall League, got off to a good start, but appeared in just a handful of games before not appearing again. There was no public word as to why that happened. We can only guess that it was an injury, but again, until we learn more, not entirely sure why Cunningham appeared in just 6 games in the AFL before his time there ended. We know that with Cunningham, when he is healthy, you go back to his college days, he's one of those players that flashes a little bit of everything, looks like he could stick in center field, and a high athlete guy, but one who has struggled with injuries in the last few years. Bob, I know that Cunningham has kind of gone up and down your list since he came into pro ball, but you held on here with their second to last spot. What do you see from Cunningham going into 2025?
I can't quit the tool shed. No, this was, just for the record, this was before the latest international signing period. So if you look at my current list, he is no longer in the 50. But before that, I just still tantalized by the upside. It's almost like John Rhodes light. Like, he's got the athleticism, he's got the raw power, seemingly the defense, the arm, if he's healthy. He's shown flashes of power. I just feel like he's a guy that if he could stay healthy and put it all together, there's something there. Like, it's not like they drafted him for no reason. So maybe just holding out hope that he can start to put it all together in 2025.
Yeah, I want to know what the injury was or what happened in the Arizona Fall League. That's the biggest thing for me. I honestly don't know if he's healthy or not right now. Is he going to start the year on the minor league IL list? We have no idea, but he's the most frustrating just because, like you mentioned, his start with Delmarva right after he was being drafted was very good. The numbers may have not been eye-popping, but watching him, like, robbing a home run, his first home run at the plate going opposite field, like, this is a premier athlete at the college level. He was very much worth the pick, and it's a fantastic idea to take a shot on him and bring him into the organization. But the injuries continue to pile up there, and we don't know what his current status is. But then he goes to the Arizona Fall League and he has those 5-6 games where he's hitting off the charts. And I know offensive stats are through the roof in the Arizona Fall League, but still, it's to see an inexperienced bat like that perform as well as he did was promising, and then it's just immediate nothing. So yeah, he's still a guy that I think as long as he's healthy, he did get promoted to high A. So I think as long as he's healthy and on the field, I think he's worth paying attention to. But I do think he's 23 years old now. I don't know when he turns 24, but he's got to get it going like immediate. He's got to hit the ground running, or he's going to get passed pretty quickly in this organization.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll go now to the final player to earn a best of the rest designation from us, and that is catcher Anyudis Mordon, who ranked 50th on Bob's list. Mordon, in his first full year of pro ball, showed what makes him an interesting prospect, a catcher who, with a loud power tool, who also draws his fair share of walks. Now, that's going to come with a lot of strikeouts, and there are questions about whether or not he can make enough contact consistently to take advantage of that power as he moves up through the minor leagues. All of that said, Mordon was good enough to earn a late season promotion to high A Aberdeen, where he will presumably begin the 2025 season. I have to say that Mordon's power is a pretty loud tool, and it alone makes a case for him making our top 50, especially if he is able to stick behind the plate. But as I just covered a little bit there are some definite risks with him. So, Bob, kind of give us your assessment of where Mordon stands at this point and how you see him performing going forward.
Yeah, I like Michael Hernandez better than him, or not Michael Hernandez. Who am I thinking of? Miguel Rodriguez. Very similar names. I like Miguel Rodriguez better, at least because I think he has a better chance of sticking behind the plate long term, and I just think a better overall offensive game. But Anyudis Mordon can impact the baseball. Like, that is definitely there. That is a rare quality from a catcher. He's an offensive-minded catcher. If he can stick there, maybe he's a first base down the line guy. But if he can just, make more contact, a little less swing and miss to his game, impact the ball more often. I think there's something there. He's 20 years old, so he's still very young. I just think someone that has the power that he has at his age, had 8 home runs in 2023, 13 last year, 29 extra base hits total. You just, that's a guy you're going to keep around, and hopefully he can, cut down on the swing and strike rate. The plate discipline could go up as the strikeouts go down, the swing and miss. Then you got a hitter.
You talk about Doug Hodo being your uncle's favorite player when they go to a Chesapeake game. When your uncle goes to an Aberdeen game, Anudas Mordon is not going to be his favorite player. But it's the home run trot is the thing I'm talking about. He takes his sweet old time going around the bases. But the thing with Mordon, I agree the power is for real. I need more data points on him to feel confident. Like, what is he putting up against, velo? Can he handle high velo fastballs? What's the bat speed like? I imagine there's probably concerning numbers when you look at some of the rest of his stats, but with Mordon, I just see somebody who, as he gets higher in the organization, he's going to strike out more. And I just see him really struggling. If he sticks behind the plate, then that's obviously going to help. Because if he's a 220 hitter who pops double-digit home runs, he's going to carve out a long career as a depth catcher in pro ball. But also not entirely confident in his, defensive scouting report. So I think with Mordon, like if I knew better, like what does the organization view him defensively? How do they view him defensively? And some other data points that we don't have access to, I'd feel better about ranking him. But just going off the eye test, I think I just see a guy who's going to struggle when he gets like up to AA. Like, is this going to be it for Mordon? And if it is, though, there are 10 other quality catchers right behind him coming through this organization. Catching is not a position that the Orioles are lacking when it comes to prospect depth.
That is for sure.
Yeah, Nick, your thought process was kind of the same as mine with Mordon. And to give a little bit more background into my list and my process, there were 3 catchers up for consideration for my final spot on the top 50. And it was Mordon, Miguel Rodriguez, and Silas Ardway. Now, if I wanted to go purely on who am I most confident in reaching the major leagues, I would have picked Ardway because the glove is going to get him there. But is he going to have a steady career as a backup catcher in the major leagues, or is he going to be an Austin Wynns type where he's mostly AAA depth but gets major league time with bad teams? Mordon has the wildest tool in the whole bunch with his power, and I like the walk rate, but I have a lot of concerns about whether or not he can stick behind the plate, and the bat just isn't going to carry at first base if it stays the way it is now. So in the end, I settled on Rodriguez, who I thought was a more well-rounded hitter than Mordon. And while the defense is not as good as Ardway's, for being a younger catcher, it's pretty good. And most reports that we have available to us publicly suggested he can stick behind the plate. So I landed on Rodriguez, but there was, consideration for those 2 other players. And I think very logical thought process could have led to Mordon going on my list over Rodriguez, or Ardway going on, which I think would have knocked both of them out of the top 50.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect thought process, and pretty much agree spot on. I just gave Mordon the nod over Ardway because I don't know. I like the power hitters, I guess.
And for that does it for this look at the best of the rest for our top 50. And keep an eye on these players throughout the season, because at any point they could jump onto our top 50. And as I mentioned, not just make it on, but really move their way up the list pretty far. So keep an eye on these players. And of course, if you have not read or listened to our top 50, go back and find last week's episode, or go check out oriolesontheverge.substack.com. Nick wrote up full reports for all 50 players that were ranked. I wrote a follow-up article highlighting some of the big takeaways from the list, some of the big themes that help give the Orioles farm system a lot of depth, even as some of the top prospects either graduate or are traded. Bob, Nick, and I will be back next week to cover all the latest news in Birdland. In the meantime, you can check us out on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Twitch. We're also over at Substack, as I just mentioned, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. And while you're browsing around the internet, be sure to head over to our Patreon community and sign up to become a member today. You can join for as little as $3, have access to Patreon exclusive channels in our Discord chat, and bonus coverage throughout the season from Bob, Nick, and myself. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by BetOnline and part of the Believe Podcast Network.